everyone. Thanks for coming. And thanks for, let's see, what else? Thanks for your show of support for the library and one of our best friends, the Southampton Historical Museum. As you know, we sort of co-sponsored quite a few programs with them, and we have a few coming up this summer that should be really terrific. We do a lot here. Most of you are patrons of ours, but several of you are from outside of our library district, so please take the newsletter. We have several flyers on the table, several of many. So there are many that aren't there, so check us out, and we open our programs to everyone, and so we'd love to see you all. Today, we are having a program that was originally scheduled for the winter, and we're delighted that it's happening today. Many of you know Tom Edmonds, who is the executive director of the Southampton Historical Museum. He has had over 30 years of experience working in historic houses and museums in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Florida, and New York. And he has been the director here since 2006. Boy, time goes by. He serves on the board of the Hampton Visitors Council, Give Where You Live, and on the Association of Suffolk County Historical Societies. And he also part-time does Airbnb in his great mid-century house in Madison. Please welcome Tom Edmonds.
Thank you, Penny. This talk was Penny's idea, actually. She said, well, Tom, why don't you talk about something? And I said, well, what about? And so, I don't know, whaling captains, the Southampton Historical Museum is focusing on the whale this year. I think most of you know that you're invited to the exhibit. After my talk, you can come to the Rogers Mansion and see more about what I'm talking today. The whales. What I thought was interesting, because I'm not an expert on whaling, but I'm a big admirer of historic buildings. So what I thought would be more interesting, since a lot of you live in the village here, is to know about your village. There are a surprising amount of whaling captains' houses still here in the village that you can see. So that's the focus of my talk. Not every house is a whaling captain's house, but most of them are. So maybe it should have been the remaining homes of mostly Southampton whaling captains. Anyway, I think everybody knows who are the first whalers here in Southampton. Actually, before the Shinnecock, there were the Paleo-Indians. Paleo-Indians came here. There's two theories now, either over the Alaskan Bering Straits, or they were Clovis people who came from Europe following along the glaciers that were covering up most of the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. So they came to Southampton 12,000 years ago, and they liked whaling. Whales were abundant. There was plenty of them. They were harvesting whales in Europe, probably 50,000 years ago at least, and so they came with skills about learning about whales. This is a great artifact that was found in Brookhaven by a farmer who was plowing his fields in 1840s, and it depicts a Shinnecock whaling hunt. We think it was made about 1,000 years ago, but in the center you can see the whale and those strange shaped pieces that are coming out from the whale are wooden dugouts. And then surrounding the stone, this is a drawing of the stone, surrounding the stone are whale tails. It's hard to say. Here's a beautiful painting by David Van Martien. David is the director of the Shinnecock Museum on the reservation, and whaling culture is very important to the Shinnecock. And here he's depicting a hunt. And why are Shinnecock so important to our story is that Shinnecock were readily available. When the English came here in 1640, the Shinnecock already knew how to whale, and many of them were well known in the 19th century. This is a photograph of David Wakas Bunn, who went on many voyages and died in a shipwreck on the Circassian. The Circassian was a horrible tragedy that happened off the coast of East Hampton, I think, where 10 Shinnecock were trapped and died on this. And that's a topic of a whole other lecture. I don't know, most of you know Robert Wilson at the Watermill Center. He's writing an opera about this event. Wickham Cuffey was born in 1826. He was a well-known whaler. He was nicknamed Eagle Eye for his ability to spot whales. And his memories were recorded by historians in the 19th century and the early 20th century, and they're still good today. They were important information about Native American life here on Long Island then, and they still are today. Captain Aaron Cuffey, this is a great photograph. He was rescued from a shipwreck in the Arctic in 1859. He later captained the steamship New London. This photograph shows that he was successful. He was fashionable. If you were a man of means, you went to the barber and had your mustache trimmed. And he has on appropriate clothing, actually fashionable clothing for about 1880s or 1890s. Captain John Ogden arrives in Southampton in 1647, and he is the first English whaling captain in the Americas, both North America and South America, so he's important. This is not a portrait of him, unfortunately, but it's from the same period, and English settlers, when they first came to Long Island and the colonies anywhere, would wear armor. So this is a very good similar portrait of what John Ogden would look like. Ogden applies for a patent from Southampton magistrates to settle 6 families on Cow Neck in North Sea. Does everybody know where Cow Neck is? Oh, good. In 1650, Ogden is given the first patent in the Americas for offshore whaling. So, Southampton is first, not Nantucket, not New Bedford. Southampton has the first organized offshore whaling by English settlers. Ogden quickly develops the port of Feversham on Cowed Harbor, which is known today as North Sea Harbor. How important is Feversham? Let's look at this 1675 map of New England. Can you all see where Long Island is? It's painted green on the lower left-hand corner. I didn't do that. That's the way I found it. And let's take a close look at that. Can you recognize the South Fork? And there's only one town or port that's recognized, and that one right in the center is Feversham. S's are shaped like F's in the 17th and 18th centuries, so that is the only port that's listed or of importance on the East End. The port of Feversham becomes the 3rd largest port in the colonies after Boston and Philadelphia. Feversham has a custom house, warehouses, taverns, farmhouses, and a brick kiln.
And where was it exactly?
Well, we're not sure exactly. Cow's Neck, at the corner of Noyak and North Sea Road, there's a little triangular square. That might have been a location, but we don't really know. It would take infrared photography or something to be able to find the settlement. John Ogden's house would have looked similar to this one. This is a reproduction that you can go to Plymouth Plantation and see. Feversham was built up really quickly. They didn't spend a lot of time on their houses because everybody went to work. It was a very successful port. So, like the Plymouth Plantation, the plantation people made quick houses quickly so they could plant, so they could hunt. They didn't make formal houses like you think of. This is a great list. In 1687, 14 whaling companies are listed in the Southampton town records. There was about 10 men in each company, and you can see the list of the captains below. In 1687, they produced 90,000 gallons of whale oil, and if you look at the abbreviation, you'll see BBLS. That stands for blue barrels, and blue barrels are another type of measurement that was popular in the 17th and 18th century. So look at the names. Look at these names. They're all local. We're going to be seeing the descendants of James Cooper. You can see where I underlined Cooper, Pearson, Post, Sayre, and Howe. There's other ones that I don't have as much information on, but they all went on for 300, 250 years. Their descendants also became whaling captains. So I think it's really interesting. Here is a blue barrel. That's gigantic. Can you imagine? That's a 20th century photograph, but the size is overwhelming. During the 1600s, whales are abundant. Voyages start out taking a couple days and then maybe a week or two. That's all that a whaling voyage was because there were so many. In 1680, Feversham is exporting whale oil to Boston and London, cordwood to North Carolina, and barrels of dried pork to Virginia. This is all in the Southampton town records. And here's another great map. I think we'll take a closer look at it. Can you all see Feversham? On the North Fork, there's a Hampton. It's given sort of a Southampton is listed over on the bottom right, but Feversham is still on the map. Feversham is similar to Ellis Island, with immigrants landing from England and Massachusetts to settle all of Long Island. Southampton thrives because of Feversham. Here's a 1729 postal map. You can see, you bend your head to the right. You can see Southampton is abbreviated on the bottom. Feversham is between Southampton and East Hampton. Sag Harbor is founded in 1707 because of its deeper harbor. Ships were getting larger, and Sag Harbor could handle larger ships closer to the shore where the warehouses and the docks were. Feversham begins to decline. Here's a 1777 map. That circle is basically approximately where Feversham would be. It's no longer there. You can see a road that goes from Southampton over to East Hampton and then up to Sag Harbor. Those are trade routes. The whaling industry peaks in 1847, then quickly declines as whales become scarce. Voyages take over 3 years. Imagine being separated from your family for 3 years. Anything could happen in 3 years. You might not come back, your wife dies, all kind of things could happen, but 3 years is just amazing to me. Kerosene replaces whale oil, and Sag Harbor is a ghost town in the 1870s. And I saw a photograph recently, I didn't include it in this lecture, but it shows Sag Harbor with nobody in it. Can you imagine that today? Almost impossible, right? Here's an 1858 map of the village of Southampton. Those red dots are where whaling captains' houses were in 1858. I can't talk about all of those because some of the houses are disappearing. But the list here are the names of captains who I will be talking about. The first one is Captain Jeter Rose. His house is almost at the end of North Sea Road. It's a very prominent house. It was Jeter Rose. Yes, it's John Griffin's house. I can hear the whispering. Rose was born into a very wealthy, land-wealthy family in North Sea. He was known as Rough and Ready. His wife, Carolyn Benedict Rose, was nicknamed Caddy. She joined her captain, Jeter Rose, and she went to sea for 18 years with him.
Oh.
That was one way to keep a marriage together. She gave birth to a daughter, Emma, in Hawaii, and Caddy oversaw her education on board ship. Emma Rose logged thousands of miles before her 13th birthday. What a childhood. And on a ship full of men. That must have been tough. And she wrote fascinating letters to her grandparents about her life on whaling ships. That's a picture of her on the left, and she looks very much like her mother.
Yeah.
Not surprising. In one letter, Emma wrote the story of a burly crew member who was unhappy with the quality of food on board. In anger, he threw a barrel of butter overboard. Captain Rose promptly picked up the man, threw him overboard along with the butter. And Albert Jagger. His house is on North Main Street. You'll see in a minute. He was not a captain, but he did invest in the Southampton and California Mining and Trading Company. That's big name for big prospects, I'm sure. The stockholders were hoping to get rich from the California gold rush. The company included 19 whaling captains and 41 others from the East End. 19 captains on one ship. Think of the arguments that were going on about the captain who was in charge. The company bought the ship Sabina, which sailed in 1849, and it was captained by Henry Green. Albert Jagger was the Sabina's storekeeper, and he wrote letters home chronicling the experience of the gold rush of 1849. A storekeeper, of course, is like the purveyor of goods, somebody who kept inventory and may have probably sold things to sailors who were on ship. The letters were found. This is Albert Jagger's house, maybe from the 1950s or 60s. The letters were found many years later in the attic of Albert Jagger's home on North Main Street. They were found carefully wrapped in the same canvas bag that Jagger had used to send home his gold dust. And here's what the house is like today. You can just barely see it. I think a lot of you know where this is. Unfortunately, it's not long for the world. It was sold to a man who really wanted to preserve it. And he and an architect and I went into the house to take a look at it, and it's in really bad shape. It is unsalvageable, and it's too bad because the house probably goes back to the 1750s. And unfortunately, the homeowners did not take care of it. And a lot of people blame developers for coming into Southampton and tearing down historic houses. Often it's the homeowners' fault because they leave their home in such bad shape. It's impossible to preserve. Captain James Bishop lived down the street. He left Sag Harbor on the Thames in 1846. He returned 7 months later with 400 blue barrels of whale oil. So we're going to compare that in a minute. So keep that in mind. Captain Bishop's home is on North Main Street, just north of the railroad trestle. I think everybody has seen this at one time or another. You can't miss it. It's there. And so it wasn't until I did this lecture that I realized it was a whaling captain's house. Here's a 1920s postcard that shows Captain Daniel Jagger's house on North Sea Road. Captain Jagger was on the whale ship Illinois, which sailed out of Sag Harbor in 1845 and did not return for 2.5 years. On board was boat steer Jeter Rose, who I'll talk about in a minute. It returned with over 3,000 barrels of oil. So let's compare that to James Bishop's. 7 months at sea, he hits 400 barrels. And to get more, you had to stay out 2.5 years to get 3,000. So I think that shows you why you had to stay out for so long. And here's Captain Jagger's house today. It looks on the outside very, very nicely restored. Looks like there's some additions in the back from 1910 or later. Captain William R. Post. He joined a whale ship at the age of 19 and spent the next 5 years at sea. When he returned, he joined a business in Sag Harbor buying and selling whale oil and whale bone. He returned to Southampton with a fortune in 1852 to build the finest home in the village. He served prominently in the Presbyterian Church and in the village, town, and county governments. Here's the finest house in the village, and it looks pretty nice, and we'll see what it looks like today. I think most of you have seen that house before. Captain Austin Herrick made 17 whaling voyages and survived a shipwreck. He grew up in Southampton with a deep desire to own this house. Can you recognize this house? This house is at the corner of North Main Street and North Sea. There's a cannonball. There's a cannon out front that looks like it's pointing at you if you're going north. And there's a lot of trees around this house, you can't see it, but look at the little shop that's right there next to it. He bought the house, and after marrying a reluctant Mary Jagger, he retired to keep a store in that building.
So we have a great granddaughter.
Have you got the grades right?
No, I haven't. Hillary, stand up.
Now I'm in trouble. So that was nice. The store was already there when he purchased the house. The store was torn down by 1912. This is a photograph from 1912. And the store moves across the street. So that building is now housing a very nice architectural firm, but you can see the Methodist Church in the background. And there's the Design House is the gray building on the right. And here's the third location, which has been in the Herrick family for 152 years. Am I correct about that? Longer. Probably. I would think, because I think Austin came back, you know, he wanted to be a storekeeper sooner. I think this is in your advertising.
Okay.
So can...
You haven't updated the advertising.
The advertising's from 1990, right?
And this is a different branch, and not Austin. This store was
It's got the name, Eric. That's all I care about right now. Thank you very much. One in every crowd. So here it is today. And you see it has an historic marker on it. And you're going to trip me on this too, because I can't read it, but I think that the house was built in 1751. Yes?
That's what the sign says.
And the building was used as a dining room or a commissary for General Erskine when he occupied Southampton during the American Revolution. And right down the street is the White House. The White House was the house of 3 whaling captains. Two of them we know almost nothing about, one we know a lot. Captain George White lived here first as a member of the White family. This house is a new house, actually built in the 1850s. I'm getting ahead of myself. But also his brother, Captain William White, lived here, and George White's son, George Gilbert, lived here.
Tom, don't we have a White in the audience? Is that Merritt? No. Yeah, there's Merritt. So Merritt is...
Maybe a different White, Huey White was my great grandfather.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah. I'm going ahead.
Okay. So George White, this is all that I can find about him, is his very significant tombstone in the North End burying ground. And if we get up closer, we can see that he had a wife named Ruth. We know that he died in 1852, I think that says. And someday I hope we can learn more. Captain White purchased the back end of this home. This was the Jagger home. There were several, of course, in 1812. So this was a very simple farmhouse that you can see on the back. And their son, George Gilbert, is born here in 1819. George Gilbert lived here all his life. George Gilbert becomes a cabin boy and for Mercator Cooper at the age of 13. And he is made captain, and he spends 17 years at sea. In 1849, he joins his friends on the Sabina to Pangold in California. He returns a wealthy man, and in the 1850s, he purchases the family home from his uncle, Captain William White, and adds a Greek Revival addition. If you look right in the center of the people standing there, that is George White. No, it's not in the center. George White is wearing a hat right up against the house, and his wife is just to his left. And they're not standing together, and Ruth is folding her arms, so she may not be happy about this photo. George marries Elizabeth Fordham. I said Ruth. That was the mother-in-law. This is Elizabeth Fordham, is George Gilbert's wife. He retires from whaling, becomes a farmer, and establishes a business with his son Seymour. We're going to see a remnant that you can see on public display in just a minute. This is letterhead stationery from George's and Seymour's company, which is very, very pompous, isn't it? It shows a lot, but they're selling fuel, coal, and vegetables to the growing summer colony. What a thing to mix. And here's the village hall inside the boardroom. A lot of you have been in that boardroom and you've seen this old sign. And if you look closely at the sign at number 3, you see the Southampton Coal and Produce Company. So this is a sign that used to be, what's the village hall? This was in the town hall, which is now a department store. What is it, a Pier 1?
No, it's a pottery barn.
Pottery Barn. Pottery Barn now on Hamptons Road and Main Street was originally the town hall where this hung. George organized the Southampton villagers to rescue sailors and passengers from shipwrecks along the ocean. He was quite good at that. Around 1880, Mecox Bay is sold to developers, and I mean the bottom of the bay as well as the land around it. It's a commercial venture harvesting oysters, and also the desire was to can oysters for the market in New York City. And it was going to take away the livelihood of the local baymen. It became known as the Mecox Bay Scandal here. George gets mad. He begins a 20-year legal battle to preserve Southampton's waterways. He leads a resistance against corrupt officials, local Southampton officials, who are swept out of office. George is elected head of the new reform-minded government. Unfortunately, George dies 2 years before the court decides against the developers. Again, it was a 20-year legal battle. And he's so well known here in Southampton, his obituary is published in the New York Times. And here's his house today. And it has been beautifully restored. I think this was on our house tour last year. A lot of you have been inside of it. The developer was a history major in college, and he became an architect for modern commercial buildings after he graduated. And so it was almost like his thesis that he never got to finish, because he just loved doing the research, and he did an excellent job. Across the street is the old post house at the corner of Post Crossing and Main Street. It's the home of Captain George Post. He was a very wealthy land developer. Here's a family grouping. His son-in-law, Captain Hubert White, is this who you were referring to?
Yeah.
Hubie, as you call him?
Yeah.
Hubie marries Post's daughter and moves into the post house. Hubert's first whaling voyage is at 18 on the Nathaniel P. Talmadge, which went to South Africa, the Arctic, and returned 3.5 years later. 3.5 years. After spending a year as a private in the Civil War, Hubie marries Sarah Post, daughter of Captain Post, and continues whaling for 40 years. That's a long time, 40 years. A lot of these guys quit earlier, but he stuck it out. His brother is Captain Elias White, is on the right there. I have no idea where he lives. Do you know where Elias? Okay. Hubie White is remembered for his kindness, humor, and geniality. His final years are a little unsettling. He spends much of his time on the front porch you're reading ahead of me. You got the punchline. So he was a little nuts, I guess. Shooting pretty women on the sidewalk with his BB rifle. We all lose our temper once in a while.
We fired at their muscles.
That's a nicer way to say it.
That was the story.
Now I got to change it, because that's a better way. I'm fine. So here's the post house today. It's been many different restaurants and nightclubs. So I don't even know if this is the old or new version. Just down the street is the Benjamin Hunting House, which he purchases in 1799. Can you recognize the house? His descendants are very successful in whaling. As captains and business owners, they marry into the most prosperous families in Southampton. Here's one descendant, Captain Benjamin Hunting II. He makes a fortune as a whaling merchant, and he builds a house in 1845 for $7,000. Do you all know the Whaling Museum in Sag Harbor? His grandson, Captain Henry Hunting, after whaling, serves in the New York State Legislature. That's a print or an illustration of the old New York State Capitol building. Another grandson, Captain James R. Hunting, makes a fortune with Tiffany and Hunting, a local trade company. He purchases a house in Bridgehampton, and it's located at the corner of Montauk Highway and Ocean Road. Do you recognize this house?
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Today it's known as the Nathaniel Rogers House, after its original builder and owner, and it's now being preserved by the Bridgehampton Museum. The Bridgehampton Historical Society changed their name 2 years ago, so they're now known as Bridgehampton Museum, but I can imagine, like our museum, that name, Historical Society, is going to stick forever. Today, the Captain Benjamin Hunting House is a B&B known as the 1708 House. Captain Isaac Sayre purchased this farm on the corner of Main Street and Hampton Road in 1825. And you can see a sign there that shows you how many miles to Montauk and East Hampton. It's right on the corner. Captain Sayre's logbook from the ship Argonaut was recently found in a dumpster. It documents a 2.5-year journey to the tip of South America beginning in 1820. The ship returned with 1,500 barrels of whale oil and 11,000 pounds of whale bone. I can't even imagine what that looks like. Luckily, it was turned into the post office in Sag Harbor, and an employee at the post office turned it over to the Sag Harbor Historical Society. Isn't that a good story?
Yes.
Behind Isaac Sayre's house, he built a barn, an animal barn. And isn't that a great postcard? If you can read the top, it is listed as the most attractive shop on the Atlantic seaboard. Isn't that amazing? So it was known as the Billboard Barn because it was right at the edge of a very heavily trafficked corner with a lot of traffic. And so billboards were put on it, billets, and while I was researching it, and I'm sorry I didn't put the photograph in, there's a circus came to town in the 1920s, and it is covered from ground to the top of the roof with circus posters. What a statement that would be. So it also in the 20th century became an antique store. An oral history is that Gary Cooper, who was a summer resident here in Southampton, would go buy a bag of crawlers, and he would share them with customers on Saturday. One of those people he shared them with was Zaza Gabor, who also lived in Southampton during the summer. Where's the barn now? The Rogers Mansion is now the location for the barn. It was moved to the property in the 1950s, and the museum restored it in 2014. Captain Eli H. White commanded the Tuscarora. Tuscarora is a Native American tribe. And the Sheffield for 10 years. He keeps single-action pistols on board for protection from pirates and to settle fights among whalemen. Not surprising. The Tuscarora was built in 1819 and made 33 transatlantic trips before being outfitted as a whaling ship. That's a lot of trips. That would be a lot of wear and tear. Eli was the captain on 6 whaling voyages on the ship between 1837 and 51. This 1841 painting shows the Tuscarora during a violent storm off the Cape of Good Hope, which is South Africa. And the insurance settlement was $5,700. I have a feeling this painting was made as part of the insurance claim. Captain White's house, I originally found it. It was right on Hamptons Road. I had the photograph. Lori Collins, who most of you know, who works at the museum, wasn't so sure about that, so she called a relative. Did she call you about Eli White's house? Well, it used to be there, but the house I picked out was wrong, so this is not the house. The house was moved several decades ago. Does anybody remember this? It
Are
was
you
moved-
talking about Hampton Manor?
No, this was.
That was on the corner
No,
of Hampton Road then?
no.
No.
I know what you're talking about. That's
Yeah.
another move.
Yeah.
But Eli's house was moved to Watermill, and it's currently under renovation. I don't think we're going to be able to see any of it after the renovation, I've been told. Captain Mercator Cooper, I guess everybody in this room should know who that is. He was very famous in his day, and he is still famous. He's very popular for historians to study whaling because of his accomplishments. In 1845, he went on the ship Manhattan to feudal Japan, and that caused the ports to be open there to world commerce. It was a first event. Pierce Conser was on the ship. He was boat steerer, and he was the first African American to enter Japan. He also became a celebrity because of this. Oops, well there we go. In 1851, Captain Cooper sailed on the Levant seeking whales and seals. In 1853, they made the first documented landing on Antarctica. That's a big deal. I didn't know that until I started researching that. The logbook for this voyage is in the East Hampton Library. It was his last time at sea. When he returned, he built Cooper Hall on Windmill Lane, and he retired to be with his family. And I think this is what it looks like today. Pierce Conser was born a slave and owned by Mercator Cooper's father, Nathan Cooper. Nathan Cooper sold Pierce at the age of 5 years old for $5 to the Pelletreau family, who made him a farmhand. He was freed in 1827 when New York State abolished slavery. Conser purchased a small cottage facing Fresh Pond on Pond Lane. Everybody knows where Pond Lane is, but what we may have forgotten is Lake Agawam was originally called Fresh Pond. He was the boat steerer on the Sabina that went to California in 1849. So you can see Pond Lane, and where my arrow is points to Pierce Conser's house, and then there's a blow up, which is not very good, but it's the best we could do for his house. Conser spent his last years running a ferry across the newly named Lake Agawam for tourists and residents. He left a legacy of $3,000 for the education of school children, which is still in use today and is managed by the Presbyterian Church. He died Southampton's most prominent resident and is the only person of color that we know of in the North End burying ground. Sadly, his house was destroyed in 2014. The empty lot was purchased by the town of Southampton, and a museum to his memory is in the works. And we have a nice brand new historic marker out in front to remind people. Uncle Thomas Warren. The word uncle, when I first saw this, kind of disturbed me. I thought, well, that's a nice, kindly name for a relative or somebody who called him Uncle Thomas Warren. But no, he was called Uncle Thomas Warren by everybody here in the village because he was such a nice guy. He made his first of many whaling voyages in 1833 on the Hudson, captained by Harry Green. After retiring from whaling, he was known to sit in Hildreth's department store and tell tales of his sea adventurers, and didn't add to this that the employees often had a hard time getting him out when it was closing time. Here's his house. It was a notable house because it was so distressed. It was sitting on Windmill Lane and Hill Street. There's a retail store there now, but it was kind of a charming look at a wreck in the village. I've been told that every village and town should have at least one ruin in it, and so I think this was the charming look at a mess of a house, an old house. We had an artist here who lived in Southampton, Zella de Millhouse. She did an etching of the house, which kind of captures its charm better than the photograph. And in our museum collection, we have his logbook, and I transcribed it there on the left. Thomas P. Warren, he's on the bark Triton, bound to the Arctic Ocean among the icebergs to get cooled off and rusticate a while. Hope to find lots of bowheads. Bowheads are a type of whale. So that's quite a fanciful title page, isn't it? Captain Peter Howe built this house on Hill Street in 1860. He joined the other Southampton whaling captains on the Sabina in 1849, and he must have done very well. His son, Captain Edward Howe, lived there after his father's death. And then I was coming across the records, a Halsey Howe. What a name. A Halsey, did anybody know Halsey Howe? Yes? So the records say that he lived there in 1979, I don't know.
And I think he had a son,
With the same name?
Eddie Howe.
Eddie Howe.
Eddie.
So Eddie Howe was named after his grandfather then. It's located on the north side of Hill Street at the intersection of Halsey Neck, and I've been in this house and it's been beautifully restored. Attention has been paid to the molding, the trims, everything's been preserved. There's very little modern conveniences that have been introduced because at the choice of the owners who love the house. Captain Albert Rogers, he was born on the property that was settled by his family in 1648. Albert added this Greek Revival edition in 1843 after a successful voyage. He also traveled on the Sabina in 1849. So I think everybody knows where this is located. This is at the Meeting House Lane behind the storefronts on Main Street. Here's another view of it. His son, Captain Jeter Rose Rogers, married Harriet Pearson, who was the daughter of a whaling captain. They lived at the Rogers Mansion until 1889. What a hairdo. There he is again. Hubie and Jeter were best friends. They enjoyed eeling together in the winter when the ice covered the Peconic Bay. One day after a successful haul, they gathered their heavy sacks of frozen eels and headed to shore. Well, guess what happened? As they neared the shore, the ice cracked and Jeter fell through a hole. Hubie got on his stomach, peered into the hole, and saw Jeter sitting at the bottom of the bay, holding on to a sack. Hubert grabbed a spear, yanked the sack from Jeter's hands, which he had refused to let go, and then Jeter finally floated to the top. So here's the Rogers Mansion today, which most of you know. It is one of 4 properties that the museum manages. The building now has 12 historic buildings, including the Sayre Barn. And funnily enough, we're having an exhibit on whales, which everyone here is invited to attend. If you come to the Rogers Mansion, you get free admission, this time only. So you'll see parts of my talk in this and also new information that's not included. Captain Pearson lived in this white house. You can see where the arrow is pointing down. This is such a great photograph of South Main Street. You can see Lake Agawam in the back, but a lot of barn buildings. Can you see barns and farm outbuildings? It's a really great photograph. The photograph was taken from the clock tower of the Presbyterian Church. That's Dr. Halleck's house to the right, the one with the dark trim. Captain Pearson's collection of whaling artifacts. I got a phone call, 2 years ago, I guess, and it was an auction house saying, would I like to buy Pearson's whaling collections? And I said, oh my God, how great, how much is it? They said, well, it was estimated to be between $30,000 and $40,000. And I said, I can't do that. So I called my friend at the Whaling Museum in Sag Harbor, Richard Doctorow, and he said, I can't afford this. And so he calls his friend, Richard Behrens, who was my predecessor at the East Hampton Historical Society. And Richard says, I can't afford this. And so he calls the library, which I don't know if most of you know, the East Hampton Library is a private library. It does not get public funds, and it's well endowed with a collection reserve account where they can buy things like this. So luckily, it stayed in the neighborhood. And they paid $33,600 for it. That's the going rate for whaling artifacts. And in the center, if you can see above the sexton, that kind of yellowish thing, that's a pan bone. It's scrimshaw. I don't know that Pearson made it or not, but it was in his collection. So pan bone is a part of a whale's jaw. And that's the thing I'm really sorry we lost. I've never seen one like it. After Pearson's death, his son-in-law Jeter and his daughter Harriet moved into his father's house. And Pearson's house is also owned by Fairfield Porter, and his Anne Porter, who was a very famous poet in her own right. And on the right-hand side, you can see a painting that Fairfield did of the house called Three Chimneys. That's in the collection of the Parrish Art Museum. And here it is today, and looks very, very nicely restored. One of Captain Edward Sayer, this is our next captain, on one of his voyages, he went to the South Atlantic in 1834 aboard the Neptune, and which appears to have been very successful. Why? If you look in the lower corner of the log, you'll see how many whales were captured, with a number I'm not sure what that means. But you can see the cut-off tails, which was, I'm sure, a source of pride. And here's the Sayer house today. The shot was taken from Google Maps in the winter, which is luckily, because you can't really see it today. It's covered up by trees. But also the owner of this house restored it, beautifully. And he just sold it.
Is that Peter Halleck's house?
It is. You're telling all the secrets here. I guess that's okay. Yeah, it's Peter Halleck's, who just sold it this spring, but right before he sold it, he pushed me to get a storied marker so that everybody would know that this is Captain Edward Sayer's house. The house says it was 1838, but I think it's older on the inside. It's got a Greek revival front, but it's a little older in the trim and the post and beam construction. Our next captain is Barney Green, who came from a large whaling family, and he married into others, like a lot of people did. The whaling families married other whaling families. Barney's aunt was Mercator Cooper's wife. Barney went on his first whaling ship at the age of 8, and after 8 voyages and 30 years at sea, he had sailed around the world twice. On his last voyage, he was rammed by a whale and went flying into the air. It was his last voyage. Here's Barney Green's house in the 1920s, maybe. He built this house to be a boarding house. A lot of people were whaling as a business was dying, but being catering to the rapidly growing summer trade was a way to make money. So Barney built this to be a boarding house. In 1885, Harper's Magazine said the home of Captain Barney Green was built for boarders, complete with hatches through which, by means of block and tackle, their top-of-the-line trunks could be hoisted to the upper rooms. And there's Barney Green's house today. In 1890, Southampton's whaling captains were honored during the town's 250th anniversary. There were 12 in 2 boats, or maybe more. You can see there's a second boat off to the right. There are 2 standing. All the rest of the men are sitting, but 2 were standing. The one in the center is Captain George Gilbert White. And on the left-hand side, you can see a dark figure. That's Pierce Concert. I stared at this photograph for years and thought he was holding a trombone. It's not a trombone, it's a harpoon. Which makes much more sense than a trombone. But this shows you the level of prominence and prestige that both Captain White and Pierce Concert had in the village. And sadly, it was the end of an era, and that's my talk. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Tom?
Sure.
So all these ships went out and all these guys stayed out for years. Were there many reports of people who did not return?
Logbooks are important information, and they were also public because a loved one would come to a ship to see their sailor husband get off, and if he wasn't there, the captain could go back to the logbook and say that we lost Sailor Sam on a certain date.
Right.
Why? So logbooks were really important like that.
But what about the ships themselves? I mean, it seems like such danger,
Oh,
was
yeah.
out there. Did many ships leave Southampton and not return, or Sag Harbor?
Because that was bad news, that wasn't published. The really great stories were like the Circassian. That was a horrible tragedy. But bad news like that just... And there's no newspapers in the 19th century here. You know, Southampton didn't have a newspaper until the end, until the 1890s, and Sag Harbor had one, but Brooklyn, when I go to look for history about Southampton, I go to the Brooklyn Eagle, which is now available online, and that has some of the details, but some of the small incidents you're talking about just didn't make the news.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Those blue barrels
Yeah.
you showed, how many whales did it take to fill one of those?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I have no idea. That's a good question. Does anybody know? Don't know. That's a research project. Thank you.
Did any of the barrels survive?
Well, that varies. You know, there wasn't standard things, but I'm trying to think from what I remember. It was more than 55, which is the standard today, so I can't remember offhand. Yes?
Do any of the barrels exist in any museums?
I have never seen one, and that photograph is the first I've seen of a blue barrel, which I just found a couple days ago. Probably not, you know, because they were big and cumbersome. How would you save it, and why? It was too heavy for just a farmer and his family to move. You would need block and tackle or something, so.
Tom, you probably have evidence of this in your museum, but I think it's interesting, and I believe it's true, maybe it isn't true, that the Mercator projection, you know, the map that looks like an orange that was splayed out, you know what I'm saying? A Mercator projection, that type of a map of the world?
Yes, I know what
That's
you
kind
mean.
of,
Yes, yeah.
you know, that was named after him.
I didn't know that.
Well, I was told that, I don't know if it's true,
That's-
but I was told that after his trip, was a new...
It's called a Mercator
Yeah.
projection. Interesting. Yes.
Did the whaling industry begin in North America, or was it done?
Whaling began in Europe 50,000 years ago. Drift whales were coming up to the shore, and it was a gift of manna. It was you had the blubber, you had the skin, you had the bones. So Paleo Indians were using whales for a long time. We don't know when that started.
Tom, can you tell us about the exhibit? I know most people are going to go over there, but if you aren't going over there, tell people what it's about.
It's about whales.
Okay.
And it's mostly about what was recorded, and we only have information about whaling in the 19th century because of photographs and logbooks, but so it's concentrated on Southampton and whaling. So
Yeah.
it's built for children. Actually, the whaling exhibit has been very popular with school kids. We've had a lot of classroom visits who come in. And it's more experiential than academic. My talk was more academic maybe, but the exhibit is more touchy-feely. You
So
can actually
people
smell
can't
some.
come-
You can actually smell some whale brine. Is that right? Wait, what? We have a thing where you can smell what a stinky whale is.
So if people can't go right now, because I know we listed it at 2:30. Now, you know, so if you don't want to wait a half an hour.
Well, 2:45 is okay.
But you could go now as well, right?
Yes, anybody that wants to go to the Rogers Mansion, and it's at the corner, it's actually across, you know where the clock tower is, the First Presbyterian Church. The clock tower behind the church is a parking lot. That's where you park your car and walk across the street. You'll see a 20-room white mansion behind a picket fence, and that's where we are. And no church. Any other questions? Yes?
Tom, Captain Jeter Rose was the first cousin of Melvin Halsey, who was the brother of my great-grandfather. And so I have a lot of letters and documents.
Oh,
In fact,
please.
the letter that was written from Caroline
Yes.
to Melvin would was what I'm talking
I don't need to own them, I just want to scan them.
about.
And if
I
we-
know.
If we scan them, they're preserved forever.
I even told Lori that I was gonna get together with you, but I haven't quite totally retired yet, so I spend a lot of time on my tractor, not too much.
If you see a black car outside your driveway,
Well, let me get to my question. Melvin was on the last trip that Jeter made, or at least I believe it was the last trip. Your exhibit talks about him going on a steam whaler, which I don't know if that's true or not, I've never heard of that. But anyway, it was the last trip, and Emma Rose was with him at Cross Carolina. But it was his only trip. The Bridgehampton Historical Society a couple of years ago had a big display and an open house commemorating Captain Melvin Halsey. So my question is, how the heck does somebody become a captain? We know how Jeter became a captain. He was on 2 or 3 trips with his uncle, and so he had a lot of experience before he ever became a captain.
it's an honorific, I think. My great-great-grandfather was called Colonel Cooper, and he was never in the military. But he was just known locally in the community as the colonel. So I think if you're an older man and you're a person of means or of influence, maybe just influence, you were given the name Captain, Colonel, and there was no certificate that came with whaling captain.
He was very young. I mean,
Yeah.
he was
It could have been self-attached too. I mean, anybody could say anything they want to. They still can today. So, it's one of those things.
Less chance of getting away with it today.
Because of cell phones, right? Yes.
Just one fun story. My father was born in the post house, and Doobie in his later years lived there and died there. And a lot of stories came out, and he was listed when he joined the Civil War as his occupation was seaman, so he wasn't a captain. And he was in the cavalry, and his horse went down in the ditch and landed on top of it. So Doobie was there for 3 days with his horse on top of it.
Oh, no.
And his pelvis all broken and shattered. And we have a letter that he wrote home to his fiancée, Sarah, Post, saying the most painful thing is when they found him, and they pulled him out from under him and threw him on a buckboard and take him to a field hospital there in Virginia. And he was there for about a year and then shipped to New York for, then he went back to sea, captain.
Who wouldn't want to go back to sea after going through that? You want to be able to. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, a friend of mine had gone to Hawaii, and he said, "You happen to have a relative by the name of Judith White?" I said, "Yeah." Lahaina was a whaling center back in the day, and the whaling museum there, they have a lot of outdoor glass cases, and we had occasion to go there because my brother-in-law was in the Navy. We took him he was stationed there. And there was Hugh's law.
Wow. I heard that was a place where a lot of sailor wives, stayed. That was a way to be closer to your husband was by staying in Hawaii.
Tom, did they get mail?
There was mail, but how good would it be?
No, I mean, I wonder how letters
You could.
I know how it is. The friends that wanted to send a letter, just like my great-grandfather wanted to write to his brother, they'd take him down and put him on every ship and send it out.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of letters that say basically the same thing, but they kept writing them and sending them on another boat. Then they get to Honolulu or some port of call, they just swap the letters.
So whaling ships had basic routes that they said they were going to. So if they said they were going to Southampton, then likely they were. So maybe that's it. Anything else? Okay, good. You're all invited to the Rogers Mansion.
Thank you all for coming. Now you can see why we all love Captain Tom so much. We'll see you soon.